The Matthew Dark Show.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, praise God and welcome in. So good to be with you, and so much buzzing around we need to get into. Before we get too far along, though, I want to go back and revisit last week. Of course, COVID-19 reemerges on the scene. And you remember COVID-19, of course, that was the virus they made in a lab in North Carolina and then shipped it to the Wuhan Viral Institute of Technology, and then it was released to the world from there. Okay, I think that's pretty clear. That's consensus. Dr. Fauci felt that way. His emails, his diary are confirming these things. But you would have thought, with all the hot button issues that we have going around the world right now, the Epstein files, where billionaires and government officials and high ranking people were raping, eating, killing children, you'd think that would be the buzz, the talk on the internet. It's not. You might think it's the illegal Iran war. You know, on February 28th, we bombed the country, killed the Ayatollah, killed the schoolgirls, have had some 40 promises, and we're going to get into the next one here, that there's a peace deal ready to be signed. We're on our way to Pakistan, to the Middle East, to sign this. We're going to have no nuclear weapons in Iran, and the Strait of Hormuz is going to be open immediately. No tolls, safe passage, back to normal. That's 40 times we've been promised that. Of course, Donald Trump on Saturday said he halted, and his words was this was to be the greatest strike since World War II. And of course, World War II, we had nuclear bombs. So it's easy to say that when it gets called off. Oh, this was going to be the one. They are so lucky they called that timing, because we were going to obliterate them hours from then. And of course, that's been the MO of this campaign, excuse me, is that we bomb. They say mercy. They have a peace deal. Nothing gets done. We go right back to a closed Strait of Hormuz. And of course, it is closed right now. Less than 10 ships a day getting through there. It used to do over 90. Okay, so that is also 20% of the world's energy that is not making its way through. So that is having the impact. Of course, oil, gas still high, higher than it should be, higher than it was before the 28th of February. And also what happened in February was the Epstein files release. The Pam Bondi testimony, I guess, was really post the release. And then we got Pam Bondi's testimony, and that was a disaster for her. Of course, Trump fired her shortly after that. He could see the writing on the wall. There is no way she's going to be able to keep a lid on this thing. They're pressing her. She's talking about Dow $50,000, all kinds of crazy things. But you might think it's Epstein files. You might think it's the Iran war. And as it turns out, what gets most excitement in people on social media, what just gets them to race to one edge or the other, still COVID. It's still COVID-19 and the vaccine that went along with it. And so it's clear it's a partisan issue. COVID-19 never was supposed to be, shouldn't have been. It affected all of us. And as opposed to we, the people, saying, hey, government, that was wrong. You screwed up. Now we demand recompense and answers. We don't get that at all. We get the left saying what a hero still today Dr. Fauci is, even after that despicable testimony. He took the Fifth Amendment, his right to say nothing under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution 111 times. And isn't it ironic, as he said, you must wear a mask to keep your job. You will take a vaccine or you will not work in America. That was his idea. We will close schools. Remember, 2 weeks to flatten the curve. That was the idea. President Trump went along. He has absolutely no margin here. He has no forgiveness yet because there's been no repent. When has Donald Trump said, hey, maybe we shouldn't have done that to the economy? Hey, maybe we shouldn't have rolled out Operation Warp Speed? He has never acknowledged those shortcomings. So he is in no better shape than Dr. Fauci. He is still respecting the presidential pardon of Dr. Fauci. He said it's a powerful thing. And why does Donald Trump not want to touch the Anthony Fauci pardon? Why? He plans to use them extensively before he leaves. He's going to need one for himself for sure. He's going to need one for Todd Blanche for sure. Remember, Todd Blanche is right now breaking federal law. And Judge Emmett Sullivan has said, no. You're going to bring me these files. This is just last Friday, folks. Bring me the files on camera. We'll go through these. And I want to hear your answer as to why this document's redacted and the reasoning behind much of what's still remaining. 3 million files still remain in the Epstein Files Transparency Act that we were told we were going to get. Law prescribes we're going to get. Federal law now judges say no, you have to turn these over, and Todd Blanchard, the Department of Justice still says can't do it, won't do it. Okay, so you'd think that would get people going crazy. You think Iran war, $2 billion a day and no end in sight. I can promise you we're going to go out on a limb here on the Matthew Dark Show and say there will be no peace agreement this week, because what does it require Iran to do? Zero nuclear ambition, and of course, no control over the Strait of Hormuz. And that can't happen for Iran, because the moment they do that, we're going to annihilate them anyways. And so they're going to continue to push this along. There's a new variable, and I want to make sure I read this to us correctly. One of the issues going on right now in the ongoing defense of Israel against Iran, and it's coming from General Alexis Grinkowicz. He is head of the European Command. He gave this warning to the Pentagon this week. This is the Washington Post's Dan Lamothe reporting this just Saturday. He sent written notification to senior Pentagon officials saying that without another Navy destroyer, he will be forced to choose between defense of the United States, the homeland of the United States, and that of Israel. The problem he's citing, they currently lack in the Middle East sufficient naval forces to continue protecting Israel from incoming Iranian ballistic missiles. So you see the problem when you're in every war in the world, and we've been pumping missiles and resources and tanks and dollars into Ukraine, been doing that since 2022. We've supposedly destroyed the nuclear ambitions of Iran last July. See, over a year ago, we sent the bombers deep into the ground. And what did that tell us? What did Donald Trump tell us at the end of that? That he wiped out the nuclear program, and that peace was about to break out in Iran. They were going to get new leadership. He was almost envisioning like a George Washington coming to the throne in Iran. A democracy would take over, and this is a done deal. Hey, thank you, I'm out of here. That's what we were told last July. Then, of course, February 28th came, and we're back in there. Why did we go back in there? Well, Marco Rubio says it was because Israel was going to attack Iran. And again, what are they doing attacking Iran? Attacking Iran. They're not supposed to be aggressive. What we're sold on Israel is that they are the victim in every circumstance being attacked. So Marco Rubio tells us that Israel was going to attack Iran, and that we knew that would be retaliation on our interests in the Middle East. So we attacked them. Okay. That's what he said right after March 1st. Now, then the ongoing theme, though, of the war is this: Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. President Trump has probably said that over 500 times since the conflict began in February. And that is what he's continuing to rally the MAGA, the baby boomer, the conservative, the rhino, the neocon. That is music to their ears. Okay, they're thinking about a nuclear weapon. That's it. Wipe them out. And that's kind of been what's keeping this. There's only 30% approval of this right now. 70% of the country is saying, just talk to them, work it out through peace, no more military. So he's got this little chunk of 30, and that's the voter I just described, that when he scares them by saying Iran was days, weeks, moments away from a nuclear weapon, and he was going to kill us all, they embrace that, and they continue to give President Trump his support. Where if they really loved and cared about President Trump, they'd be saying, this is no good. We've lost soldiers. We've lost a ton of money. We're dwindling our resources. So do you think if China wanted to take Taiwan, or Russia wanted to wipe out Ukraine, do you think we could do anything about it right now? We don't have the capacity. They're asking for $1.5 trillion next year for military budget. And that is, I'm sorry, only necessary for a country that wants to sustain foreign wars. You don't need that to protect the homeland, but you do that if you need to protect all the NATO allies, and of course, Israel, first and foremost, hand out top of every year. And this is up to $18 billion in aid, plus all the resources that we're doing right now. The general has just said we are consuming resources, and we don't have enough destroyers in the region to continue to defend them. I have to pick the United States or Israel. And so this is the moment that we're asking every American's heart to go to. You only have so much, and I know you have a big heart and you want to help everybody. But in this case, you can only pick your homeland, your brother, your sister, your neighbor, your parents, the country you grew up in, or you can pick Israel. What'll it be for you? And 99.9999% of Americans are going to pick themselves in their own interest, as they should. They are Americans thinking of America first. And that was the promise of the campaign. Make America great again, America first. And here we have done literally everything but America first. And that's how we're dwindling our supply in Iran. So you might think Epstein, you might think Iran are the hot topics. We have to get this addressed. This is going to ruin the country if we don't address these issues. And it's neither. Of course, the hottest topic on social media, the thing that gets people going in engagement, and they won't stop and they'll defend it till they're blue in the face, is COVID-19, the origin of COVID-19, and of course, then the efficacy and safety of the COVID-19 shot. The data is clear. It was not effective at stopping transmission. What they'll tell you, and this is what they're going to on the left, and of course, they think Dr. Fauci. For many Democrats right now, Dr. Fauci is the one that saved mankind. Humanity would not exist. You and I are not speaking. We're not having. You and I would not be talking right now about this issue if it was not for Tony Fauci, and that his mask. And he recommended up to 2 masks after saying you don't need a masks. He said 6 feet distance, social distance. If you're out in public, you must stay 6 feet away. In his own email, in his own literature, it's clear that that number just came out of nowhere. It just landed in the protocol basket and they picked it out and said, yeah, 6 feet apart from each other, that'll work. And what did that, of course, cause? All the businesses to close. Now, interestingly enough, they were able to close gyms and mom and pops and restaurants and stuff. Walmart was unaffected. Costco unaffected. Amazon, of course, thrived and became the behemoth, the untouchable behemoth that it is today. Netflix and Zoom and Uber and all these different things thrived. Mom and pop shut down. Schools shut down. Why? This fake came out of nowhere, 6 feet of social distancing, 2 masks. And that was just while we were in a holding period waiting for the vaccine to be ready. Now, of course, the vaccine was already well in production in 2020, 2019, 2018. The patents on the COVID-19 shot were in 2018. They are patent holder. Department of Defense at the time, now Department of War, that's who owns every single COVID shot that went into Americans' bodies. 80% of America took a COVID shot, and each and every single one of them was a government shot licensed through Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson. That's fact, okay? So it didn't look right to put a Department of Defense label on your COVID shot and say, come on, get it for free. They license it through Pfizer. And of course, these are the greatest, most ethical scientists God's ever put on this green earth. And that's what they went with. But a lot of people don't know they took a government shot the whole time. And then we come to find out that it was already in production well in advance of the virus coming out. They knew this was coming. There was much talk about a potential pandemic and that we would need vaccines to fight this. Bill Gates is famous. Dr. Fauci is famous. They knew it was in the pipeline. And so, of course, we got COVID here in America in March of 2020. And that's when the 2 weeks to flatten the curve and the masking and the social distancing and all of that went on. But of course, by December of 2020, they had the COVID shot ready. And in this case, even though they were taking tens of years to develop in the past, this time was different. We've been working on this mRNA technology for so many years, for 20 years, Dr. Fauci says, to perfect it for just a moment as we find ourselves in now. That's what they told us. And of course, Dr. Fauci himself, we find through his diary that he suffered a pulmonary embolism. We found that this was hidden from the public, that he had his own reservations, never mentioned it to anybody. You know, if the lead medical director of the country, and in fact, the world at the time, is having an episode of blood clots shortly after his second Moderna, don't you think that would have put a pause in the country had they heard that? Hey, Dr. Fauci has been hospitalized after his second Moderna booster. Don't you think that would have said, well, now what's going on with this? Shouldn't we look into that? Isn't that not too good if this old man, who clearly they said needed the protection, he was in that vulnerable category, 80 years old at the time, now 85, but writing a diary in his 80s, okay, he was injured and he didn't disclose that. And so, of course, we know that January through July of 2021, we saw enormous, incredible rates of injury. We had blood clots, we had stroke, we had the myocarditis, the pericarditis, we had the instant death. We didn't even make it to the parking lot out of Walgreens. We got in line and we did the whole thing, and not everybody made it. And what the left will say is that there is absolutely no evidence that a vaccine's ever hurt anybody. And that in this case, this was a good vaccine because, yes, you could still get COVID-19, Wuhan 19, the virus they made in the lab in North Carolina and then shipped to Wuhan, China, under communist control, in which they had no oversight. Not like Dr. Fauci had permission to go in and do as he pleased and see as he saw fit in Wuhan. But of course, we gave them the guts to the virus, and then they took it from there. Vaccine already in the works, well and ahead of this thing. So you'll get from the left that says, well, yeah, but this lessens your chance of dying. But then they forget that the natural evolution of virus is super aggressive, super, like, much more lethal. And then it becomes less lethal, more contagious. And that's how it survives. It understands that it can't kill every single one it goes into, can't survive. And so as it makes its natural evolution, like viruses do, we saw these less and less and less effects of the variants. Of course, you remember Omicron and all these different ones that the vaccine was never built for, and it was never effective against. In fact, there's some Cleveland Clinic studies that suggest that your rate of your likelihood of getting COVID actually went up the more you boosted. Okay, that's Cleveland Clinic. That's a gold standard facility. CDC, FDA also confirmed that data, that it appears the more you vax, the more you're going to get COVID. And of course, we've seen that in our private life. How many people do you know that have had the COVID shot that are still alive? And we thank God they're still alive. Nothing really terrible happened to them, but they're always getting COVID. They're the ones getting sick. And the boosters were getting up into the 6 and 7. Tony Fauci was recommending a quarterly booster, that you would do 4 to 6 things of these a year, depending on your risk area. So a senior getting 6 COVID shots in a year is insane. Okay. And of course, COVID now non-existence. And of course, always remember, they've never found COVID in the wild. You can't go to a cave and find the bat that gave us COVID-19. You can't find it. It didn't exist. The Wuhan wet market story was a myth. And Dr. Fauci knew that. He knew that privately. He confided that privately. But when it come to the public, nope, it was those dirty Chinese at that filthy wet market. It was a pangolin or a bat or something gross, and it gave us all COVID-19. That's what he told us publicly. His diary says differently. His emails say differently. We know he was deleting government emails. I mean, setting all that aside, Democrats, you don't need to rush to his defense. Nothing is going to happen to Dr. Tony Fauci. Zero, zilch. You would already have taken that vote. You would already be having these contempt charges leveled upon him. He's going to get more subpoenas. He's going to do the exact same thing, but nothing's going to happen. I don't think you have to worry a thing about it. That's not what, don't worry about him. Worry about you, because the same monsters that supported and allowed Dr. Fauci to do what he did for 54 years in government health. And also, don't forget, Dr. Fauci graduated medical school. He went right into health administration. He became a bureaucrat right away. He never saw patients. He never had a clinic. He was never treating anyone. He went right into the role that he stayed in for 54 years. And he has no credibility when it comes to patients, right? He's never seen one. But he gave orders all across the nation and the world that you need 2 masks, you need 6 feet away, and the vaccine comes, you take it, it's going to save your life. And the left still believes in that. And that's sad, because Donald Trump is an equally guilty party in the COVID response, Operation Warp Speed. He allowed the 2 weeks to flatten the curve thing to go on. He gave it its blessing. He'll say it was the governors. It was him. He gave it its blessing. Of course, he could say you can't do that. It's just, I'm the president of the United States. You can't close all these schools. You can't do all that stuff. But they did, and it ruins a lot of children's lives. It ruined a lot. We saw obesity skyrocket. We saw depression skyrocket. People became isolated, and their lives changed. They used to go into an office, and then after COVID, they worked from home. Now everybody works from home. Everybody works in their pajamas, or they work for Uber, or they work for Amazon. They deliver packages and people. Okay, that's what happened post-COVID. And not to give Dr. Fauci too much credit, he's not God. He permanently altered the trajectory of the country, the world, the universe by his diabolical obsession with being famous during COVID as people were suffering. His diary confirms, and of course, he didn't deny his diary. He wrote all that up, and the left will say, oh, how rude, how mean. You're just intimidating him, embarrassing him, and just shows what do you know. And they don't like Ron Paul, and they say, well, Donald Trump took the fifth 400 some odd times in his previous cases. This has nothing to do with Donald Trump. Maybe Donald Trump's the greatest president we've ever had. Maybe he's the biggest scumbag, worse than Joe Biden. Why can't Tony Fauci be independently reviewed, assessed, and held to account? Who cares what Trump did? Trump also needs to be dealt with. If you're a Trump fan that took the COVID shot, you're owed an apology. If you're a Trump fan that dismissed the COVID shot, said we're not doing that, but we're still going to vote for you in 2024, he owes that person an apology. The COVID-19 shot should have never existed in America. It was never fit for human consumption. They could still be testing it right now and it wouldn't be properly safety tested. But guess what? COVID's gone. When is the last time you heard somebody get COVID and it was like a big deal, a problem, more than the flu or food poisoning or a sinus infection or an ear infection or strep throat? Can you point to anybody right now in your life, in your circle, that is getting whacked and beat up by COVID? The virus? Of course you can't. Doesn't exist. Now, you might be able to go into your life and find, well, some of the people I knew that took a vaccine don't seem as healthy as they once were. And that's probably true. It did a wreck on your immune system. Spike protein, they took the most toxic part of the virus and they based the vaccine on that. And that's what we can't get out of people's bodies. That's what's causing the blood clots and the strokes and the heart, everything associated with the heart. CDC confirms, doctors, you must warn teenage boys there is an increased risk of myocarditis. So if you're a mom of a 17-year-old active boy, you're more worried about him getting COVID, the cold, and we saw children were unaffected by COVID, than you are, but you'd rather risk myocarditis for your 17-year-old son? Are you? No. And so shame on the medical establishment that even put that in the mind of a mother. Children were unaffected by COVID, period, end of story. You know who was really affected by COVID? Our super obese, our high blood pressure, our comorbidities, our autoimmune disease people, and our very old people, our sickly people. And of course, you know what they did in New York. They put the sick patients in. I mean, when you say that out loud and remember that, think about that. Nursing homes were receiving sick, infected COVID people. And it didn't matter if they had the flu or strep throat or pink eye. You should not be citing them with seniors in a nursing home. Are you nuts? And of course, Governor Cuomo thought he was a hero. Another example of someone that COVID came and he thought he was, and he became a celebrity in his mind. And the fame got, now they ran him off. So obviously he turned some way wrong at some point on them. He had a little bit of Me Too going on, couldn't even beat Mom Donnie again. But Governor Cuomo was putting sick COVID patients in with seniors in nursing homes, and they were dying there. The other place COVID folks were dying was the hospital. And of course, the hospital protocols, remdesivir, morphine, and a ventilator. And ventilators were a part of Operation Warp Speed. If you remember, GM Motors was dedicating part of their facilities to produce tons and tons of ventilators. Well, that killed a lot of Americans. COVID was not forcing a ventilator. Doctors were doing that. They would do a pulse ox and sense a little drop in pulse oxygen based on the viral response. And they would throw them on morphine, remdesivir, a failed drug remdesivir, a dangerous drug remdesivir, and then a ventilator. And if you know anything about ventilators, ventilators are incredibly challenging to come off of once you've been on them. And in fact, we knew a really healthy guy early in COVID. I was like, well, how does this guy getting in such bad shape? He was a runner. He was fit, ate pretty good. He was good shape. He was on a ventilator for 12 days, barely survived it. Guy was like 32 years old. He should have never been on a ventilator. Really, it was a simple protocol: ivermectin, steroid, quercetin. Don't eat junk food while you're sick. Go outside and get vitamin D while you're sick. And Dr. Fauci was saying the opposite: wear a mask, stay indoors, stay away from people. Ivermectin, HCQ, they don't work at all. And why did he have to say ivermectin didn't work? Why did he have to say HCQ, hydrochloroquine, didn't work? Well, because when you have available medicines to treat a disease, you cannot enter that vaccine or any experimental medicine into the emergency use authorization. It has to be, there is nothing else on the market to help these people. We must have the vaccine. And so what do? They begin to discredit. And remember Joe Rogan, they gave Joe Rogan all kinds of, they did a filter on him, make him look yellow after he took ivermectin. This is CNN. You remember all the games. The FDA would say, you're not a horse, you're not a cow, don't be taking ivermectin. And there was government campaigns against ivermectin, but they were all in on the vaccine. And the bottom line is there was no choice. You couldn't get ivermectin at King Soopers or Safeway or your pharmacy. They were saying if it's for COVID-19, we won't fill it. Pharmacists were doing this, okay? Pharmacists were reporting doctors. Doctors were reporting other doctors that would dare prescribe ivermectin for their patients. Families were having to force emergency injunctions, getting a judge involved to force hospitals to just try something. You're killing them on morphine, remdesivir, and a ventilator. Please let us try ivermectin. And some judges would allow it. Others would not. These are hospital protocols that killed people. You understand that. Remdesivir is a failed drug. Look it up. Look where it failed. It never belonged in the human body, certainly not as a response to COVID. So COVID today still remains the most passionate conversation online. How do we know that? Well, there's people that after 6 years and COVID being completely gone will look you in the face and say, could you imagine being scared of a vaccine, more scared of a vaccine than death? I mean, the way they process this from government into their mind was that if you don't take this vaccine, the likelihood of you dying is strong. Great, and probably going to happen. And then they proceeded to march around society and force that same fear onto other people. And some people were not fearful at all. They weren't fearful for the virus. They were like, holy cow, our government would do this to us? And see, this is when it's really over for government. When these monsters on the left that are all into the COVID shot and these people on the right that defend every action of Trump's and pretend that he is actually saving the country right now, when we forget all of that, and remember, it's we the people versus them, the government, they did this to us, they're toast. And so to the Democrat who is taking a shot, to the Democrat who is still defends Tony Fauci and what he meant to them in their life in that scary moment, okay, to that person, it's over. And his despicable testimony last Wednesday confirms and should confirm in your mind that he didn't have your best interest in mind. He had his own ego and fame and opportunities first and foremost. He was writing, oh my gosh, you'll never believe who I had dinner with. Oh my gosh, 20 people wanted to shake my hand. Oh my gosh, the interview requests are just lined up. You know, he wanted to be famous so bad, and this was his moment. And of course, a little tiny guy, not a stud by any means. And so this was his one moment and he took it. Of course, he was, I'm more famous than Donald Trump and he doesn't like it. And he's coming after me. And of course, Tony Fauci kind of came out of nowhere from a public perspective, or at least a 40-year gap since he was such an instrumental deficit in the AIDS pandemic. Of course, he was AZT. Again, go back to AIDS. Dr. Fauci was pushing AZT. And that's how all the gay men were dying, is accelerated death, certainly through AZT. You need to look that up as well. That's Dr. Fauci special. But he really hadn't had a limelight moment until COVID-19, till March 2020. And then everybody knew him. And for some people, because they weren't following the Lord Jesus Christ, they had no God, they had no higher power, and they were scared. And Tony Fauci took that fear away because he was going to deliver safety to us. He was going to get the vaccine made. He was going to have us do the double mask. He was going to close the schools, flatten the curve, put the children on Zoom. You know, they were scared, but they felt like help was on the way with Tony Fauci. And then now that we read his diary, that is not what he was doing. And he knew better this whole time. He knew it wasn't a wet market. He knew it was a lab leak. He knew that the COVID shot was causing injury and that it wasn't effective at stopping COVID-19. And of course it's not. That's documented. These are not debatable things. That's in the literature. Go to the Omicron variable where you're seeing like a 30% efficacy. 30%, but it does have potential risk to you and your family. I mean, that was just all a lie. And as it turns out, most of it was lie. And if you saw him throw a baseball, that first pitch, wow, was that something to see? You know, as a grown man throwing it, I have an 8-year-old. She would throw that way better than him, way more assertive than him. So we'll play that clip too. But just a laughable man, and you felt kind of sorry for him. I mean, if he didn't cause so much damage, what a pathetic man! What a pathetic, cowardly disgrace that he goes out as. I mean, has a 54-year career, considers himself the leading scientist in all of the world. And that's what he'll be remembered as a gutless coward. Now, hopefully the Senate will at least grow enough guts to say, okay, fine, we can't go after him for his COVID crimes, but he was in contempt because he was not answering questions that he's legally required to answer under subpoena. Had nothing to do with his pardon. His pardon was totally fine, and he refused to do that. So if they don't do anything to him, you can abandon ship on any hope, any justice at any point in time in the history of this world, and until it blows up, will be done. So he has to go do a year in jail, at least for the contempt. He's obviously lied to Congress a bunch of times. They need to drag him back up there several more times because there's other areas of questioning that, of course, he'll take the fifth on, but that he didn't. This is having to do with your pardon. We just need to know this information. And so we don't think that's actually ever going to happen. So Democrats that are defending him, don't worry, nothing bad will happen. And quite frankly, guys like me that would never take a government shot, never take a government vaccine. Let me keep going that way, right? Because we're going to prove each other right or wrong. There's only one right answer. That vaccine saved humanity, or it basically started the collapse of humanity. You've got turbo cancers. You've had credible deaths. Just go look at it's wonder.cdc.gov. That's your vaccine injury. So you have to plug that stuff in and you have to want to see it, right? It's not CNN stuff. It's 100% effective and go back about your day. You're plugging in. You want to know symptoms. You want to know side effects. You want to know fatalities. I mean, just on that website alone, 50,000 COVID deaths. And we know that's underreported. But let's just take that. Call in the US, 280 million shots in that first round, at least, right? Because we had 80% of the country taking a COVID shot. Well, 50,000 is a lot of deaths. 50,000 injuries is a lot of injuries. Most vaccines never are allowed to get off the ground with that amount of damage. And so you have to go look that yourself. So we have Democrats that are burrowed down, chiseled in on Tony Fauci saved the world. The vaccine saved the world. You are a monster, an idiot, a bad person. You could have killed us all for your anti-vax demeanor, your anti-vax rhetoric. We're going to find out. We're going to find out who's thriving. You know, I'm really, really, really interested to see these life expectancies from the group of folks that came out of the COVID era. And we don't want anybody to die early. Give me a break. We want everybody to be healthy. We want everybody to be fit and full of energy and spirit. That's a culture we're always praying for every American. But that's not going to happen because we had a lot of shot takers and they were habitual shot takers. And they'll still defend that shot to this day. They'll take a flu shot again in the fall. We've been reporting in the fall, Moderna will release, and it's approved, FDA approved now. So you're going to get stamped and required. You're going to take an mRNA for the first time ever flu vaccine. And of course, that's why they can't acknowledge any shortcomings on the COVID mRNA shot. It's the future of medicine is built on that. And so any acknowledgement that maybe it's not ready, maybe it's not the way to go, maybe it's hurting people, maybe it's ineffective, maybe we better reconsider. We're just steamrolling right through the data and say, give us the next mRNA vaccine. And eventually the entire childhood schedule becomes mRNA vaccines. Now, you shouldn't be vaccinating your child to the full 72 at all. Even if you consider vaccines a good thing in the world, 72 is too much. 50 of those are in the first 2 years of life. That's too much. I mean, we're giving hepatitis B shots to babies 1 hour old. That's too much. So unless you as a mother are a prostitute or you and your husband or people in your home are intravenous drug users, you do never need a hepatitis B shot, period, end of story. They'll tell you there's other ways to catch it. Maybe. Can you cite them? Can you show me any frequency of those other ways to catch hepatitis B? So there's so many vaccines that maybe you come in and say, I'm going to do a third of them. And of course, in Europe, it's a third the list, certainly under half. So why in America, we're so dirty, we're so diseased, we're so sickly, we need to start vaccinating 1 hour into life? I don't think so. And that's a new thing because up until 1950, how are we surviving as a species with no vaccines? And so the basis of vaccines is wrong, that humanity somehow, it doesn't exist without perpetual vaccines. And we reject that, full stop rejection. And you can't just say, well, it doesn't exist, the vaccine injury. There's government data, there's government lawsuits, there's government payouts for that kind of stuff, right? So we have to acknowledge that they exist. That's where you start. Now, where it continues to have debate is for you and your family, that might be the right decision. Your risk factor, your area where you live in, the behavior you and your family participate in. For you, vaccines might be the choice, right? It's certainly not a cookie cutter. It's certainly not a blanket, one size fits all. That's the kind of medicine that gets people hurt. We have different terrains, different circumstances. We can't just dump whatever we want into each and every person and expect the same outcome. Some people are going to get wrecked. Some people are going to not notice the difference, right? That's just the way it works in medicine. And we need to acknowledge and move that on. It should never be forced by a state. It should never be forced by a federal government that you can't live your life, make your choices, do your thing without a vaccine. And so we really are fitting in this into partisan COVID talk has to shift to, hey, we were all screwed. We were all ruined in this. We all had our lives changed in a way you could never envision them differently now. I mean, the trajectory that COVID took us all on as Americans is just different today than it would have been without COVID-19. That's a fact, right? So we were all affected. Now, maybe some people got rich. Maybe some people found new opportunities. Maybe some people came to the Lord. Maybe great things happened during COVID. We're not disputing that, because how many eyes were opened during COVID? How many people thought their government would never do something like this? And then COVID-19 happened, and they look at government totally different now. A lot of people did that. A lot of people came to the Lord Jesus Christ. They wanted to get out of the darkness and into the light. They wanted to reject evil that they could see coming out of their TV, coming out of their doctor's office, and they wanted truth. They were seeking truth. We saw moms during COVID. They took their kids out of school. They homeschooled them. They saw the LGBTQs. They saw the DEI. They saw the filth that was going on in the libraries of our schools. Pornographic books our children could access. And that caused a whole nother movement. People began to homeschool, speaking out at school board meetings. And of course, cowardly school board meetings, they wouldn't even read the books or hear the filthy words that were in the books that they were letting 7, 8, 10-year-olds rent at the library. I mean, it's disgraceful. So to say COVID was all bad, that would be a lie. It did a lot of things, but it did change the course of the country. No doubt about that. Right. So you have to acknowledge that you were affected, even though you like Dr. Fauci. You were affected, even though you loved President Trump. Right. And you could hate Tony Fauci and hate President Trump, and you were also affected. It didn't matter who you were affected by COVID-19. And so because you pay for this country, fund this country, own this country as an American taxpayer, you absolutely should be demanding transparency, honesty, accountability, course correction, meaning we can never do. You really think if there was a pandemic came tomorrow, how many people would comply with a vaccine this time around? It was 80% the first go around. You guess 20% this time. I mean, you're still going to get your hardcore Democrats. So maybe it's a third. Maybe you get a third of people in the country this time, this next go around, that signs up for a vaccine. How many people do you think would wear a mask this next time around? Less than 10%? Everybody else would just say, you got to be kidding me, you nuts. Who else would allow their children to go virtual on their education after we saw what happened during the last pandemic, in which they stole up to 2 years in some states? They just stole it from the children. Canceled prom, canceled football season. We're going to educate you on a computer. Some of these kids didn't even have computers. Some of these kids had to go to school to get lunch. That's what they ate. That's how they survived. So nobody's signing up for another 2 weeks to flatten the curve, close our schools, but don't say anything online. Now, remember, Dr. Fauci cited throughout his testimony the Fifth Amendment under his rights in the Constitution. Isn't it interesting, though, there was no consideration of our rights when it came to right to choose? And this was just on the heels of the Me Too movement, my body, my choice. Isn't that the irony, too? Dr. Fauci is invoking his constitutional rights, but we didn't have the right to work unless we took his medicine, unless we wore a mask, unless we social distanced. We didn't have the right to free speech online to say, hey, maybe there's something wrong with this vaccine. A couple of people I know are pretty messed up now. I just thought you should know. That was censored. That was deplatformed. That was debanked. Remember the Canadian truckers? They were debanked. They were threatened. So constitutional rights, wherever you lived, were out the window during COVID-19. But when Dr. Fauci testifies, he leans into those constitutional rights, like it's his mommy and he's nursing. How do we let that stand, though, as Americans? If his rights matter, so do mine. Me too. My body, my choice. They want to abort babies. It's their choice. We want to reject your vaccines. It's our choice. How are the two different? From a destroying society, It's the abortions, not my anti-vaxxing. To decay in the morale of this country, it's the excessive abortions, not the fact that I don't need a vaccine. Don't need a vaccine. My kids don't need a vaccine. If vaccines work and you have them, you're in good shape. Don't make me a part of your problem. In fact, encourage me to be brave and bold and free thinking and doing my own research. And you do your own too. And I think two people should be able to look at Dr. Fauci and hear what he has to say about the COVID shot, hear what he has to say about COVID, the pandemic. You make a call. Do you believe him? Okay. For most of us that are on the side of, I told you so, not that I wanted to be right about this, but we told you so. We knew Dr. Fauci was a scam, fraud, liar from his first moments in the public as soon as the COVID virus got here. We knew that when his vaccine came out in December of 2020, that it wasn't fit for human consumption. We knew that sight unseen. Others came to that realization after 2 or 3 shots, after they had lost their job, after their kids were really falling behind in school, after they were sick of the mess. But most people, reasonable people, came to the conclusion that the government response to COVID-19 was wrong and cruel to the American people. Anybody supporting what the government did during COVID, I'm sorry, you have been captured to support what they did to us. You were never at risk of dying. Kids up until 60 years old, children up until 60 years old were not affected by COVID-19. Now, again, if you are morbidly obese, if you have a significant autoimmune disease, if you are a sickly, unwell person eating an American diet, you are going to have greater symptoms, potentially a worse outcome. But regular, normal people, unaffected by COVID-19. Maybe early on, it got a few more than it should have. And, son of a gun, I'm sad we lost anybody during COVID. But the price shouldn't be everybody now has to take a vaccine. Everybody has to wear a mask. And if you ask any questions, we'll shut you down. That was wrong. We should be in unison as the American people that the government response to COVID was just wrong. And now the reason it's good we set that basis is because they haven't repented. The government doesn't have any shame in their handling. Donald Trump himself, Tony Fauci himself, Rochelle Walensky, the CDC, the FDA, this group of people, the WHO, all these people doing these terrible protocols, these terrible restrictions. Okay. We can never allow that again. In fact, don't even suggest anything remotely close to that again. But if we're not in unison as the American people that the response was wrong and we reject it, don't ever do it again, they will do it again. And what's discouraging is that you see all this talk online post Tony Fauci 6 years after COVID. We're not even close to unison. We're not even close to the messaging required to the government from we the people. We reject what you did to us. Do better or leave government, right? And of course, Tony Fauci there for 54 years. Just ridiculous. So just a fascinating circumstance. COVID-19 really rocked people's world. Some of them are still captured by the COVID moment. Others are so bitter and resentful for what it took from them. Others are saying, you guys are nuts for even discussing this. Like it's real. This was a government created virus and a government created vaccine. It's all you need to know. To defend anybody associated with that is just wrong. Right. And there's bigger things to deal with the government on than just COVID-19 shots. We reject them. Uptake on the COVID shot is now less than 7%. Nobody's getting COVID shots. Nobody's getting COVID and it's over. So we move on. But your thinking has to kind of evolve too, or they're coming back for you on the next one. Okay. That's COVID-19. We put a button on that. We move on. But hopefully Tony Fauci does have some kind of consequences for what he done. At least give us your prize money back. He got $1 million prize for this. He had a ton of royalties. Let's have his prize money back. How about that? Let's spread that out between some homeless people, some underprivileged children, people trying to get off the street. Let's do something with Tony Fauci's money since he clearly didn't earn that in an honorable way. Okay. So we move from there to Iran. So we just kind of put a top on Iran and the United States and the other Middle East, the Gulf states are the ones that said, please don't bomb them. Let's talk. Because why do they want it to stop? Well, Iran is bombing the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, where we have bases, Jordan. And they're saying, well, let's stop this. Let's talk to them. You see the problem here. Now, other people in the region are being affected by this war. And they're saying, please don't do this anymore. Please stop. And so on Monday, the Trump team, the Trump negotiations team, will go to the Middle East and they will try to make a deal with Iran, which essentially doesn't exist. We talked about at the top, Strait of Hormuz open, never any nuclear. Iran can't agree to that stuff. So we continue the charade. Everybody can kind of rebuild a couple of days of stockpiles, get a little bit of rest, but the war must continue. And you'll know it's either won or lost or in peace or not in peace by the Strait of Hormuz. Right now, it is effectively closed. 5 ships a day get through there. That's nothing. That isn't going to work. And before February 28th, 94 ships a day would go through there. So President Trump said that this was going to be the greatest strike in 80 years. I pulled it off because they say they want to talk. He has said over 40 times that there's a peace deal on the table, ready to be signed, both in agreement. None of those have come to fruition. I will promise you, nor will this one. Israel cannot let this stop. Iran cannot let this stop. And the United States can only annihilate or leave in shame. Those are the only 2 alternatives for Donald Trump right now. He doesn't want to annihilate Iran. He doesn't want to wipe out the civilization, even though he's promised to do so several times. He doesn't want to do that. You can clearly see that. Anybody said peace, he jumps to peace, right? But he goes back to the bombing because there is no peace. That's a myth that there's a peace deal on the table, that J.D. Vance had it on the writing. Remember the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding, that lasted like a week, and that's now been torn up. They're not still working on that same deal. The only reason they signed that deal is because President Trump has some deadlines, some timelines that he has to obey. He has to get approval from Congress to continue this war. But if he can get a ceasefire and stop his timeline, then he can resume this and add it. And he's just playing games with the Epstein files, playing games with the Iran war. And of course, it's being totally rejected by the American people. 70% of America says, Democrats and Republicans, hey, we're not into this. Just negotiate it and be done. $2 billion a day war, and we pay higher gas prices all day, every day, while it continues. And of course, you have a major economic wall we're about to hit. And so more tough times are coming. And if we, the people, don't understand together, we're being affected by bad government, bad candidates, bad policy, well, then they just are going to push it. And here we go with Democrats who are most certainly going to gain control in November, most certainly going to be president in 2028. And so now we get all the inflation, plus we get the LGBTQ shoved down our throat. Plus we get an open border shoved down our throat. We get DEI shoved down our throat. And we have only one man to thank for that, Donald Trump. Why? Played games with the Epstein files, went to war, and increased our cost of living. Death sentence. Independent MAGA guy, the guy in the middle that he brought over in 2024, he's lost that guy. Half of his original MAGA base, the one that got him going in 2015 to the 2017 move, and then followed him and walked over glass again in 2024, he's lost half of those guys. So essentially, Donald Trump goes into November with a third of his fan base. That ain't going to cut it. Democrats have already been over. Remember, we still have mail-in voting. There's not going to be a SAVE Act. And to get the SAVE Act, you have to okay the merger with U.S. and Israel militaries. And nobody wants to do that either. Not only Americans. You can tell the ill will has overtaken America when it comes to Israel. Israel understands that. Our Zionist politicians understand that. And so they're saying, hey, the people don't like this relationship anymore. Why don't we make it law that we're going to be connected forever? That way, the opinion of the people doesn't matter. That's a problem that's coming from the right. It's not being pushed back. It's not being, Donald Trump has yet to speak on this, that our military could merge into that level of intimacy with Israel. I mean, I already know they're sharing and spying and giving. This would cement that to a whole new level. And it would create sort of a miniature NATO agreement inside there to where, if, once again, if Israel feels threatened, if Israel wants to pursue a war, contractually, we have to support them or give them all the tools to do it. And we saw what happened in Gaza with our tax money and our military resources. They killed 50,000 kids. So America saw that and said, we're out. You're kidding. I had no idea we were wasting that kind of money on that kind of atrocity. We want out. So we're watching Epstein files. The judge has ordered the DOJ to sit in front of camera, release those. We're watching Iran war. Trump says we've got a deal. Monday afternoon, we could have peace, and this is all back to normal, and he is celebrated till the end of time. Of course, that's not going to happen, but that's what we're being told as of right now. And then, of course, we continue to see the fallout from Tony Fauci's just embarrassing testimony from last Wednesday. Will anything happen to Tony Fauci? And should anything happen to Tony Fauci? And of course, the answers are no, nothing will happen. Yes, stiff things should happen to Tony Fauci. And so it's going to continue. We see a wrongdoing from government. We complain for a minute. Nothing happens. We continue to send in our money. We pay taxes. We celebrate politicians. So it stands right now, America's not close to breaking through. We're not close to getting our country back. In fact, you could say we're losing it. The grip on our country is about lost. Democrats want to take it, turn it over to communists. Republicans want to actually protect and cover up pedophilia and stay in forever wars. Both parties are unacceptable to the average American. So it is prime time for a third candidate. It is prime time to let your voice be heard. It is prime time to just get honest in your life and say, I don't know if my government has my best interest that much of the time. It's a really good place to find yourself. We'll be back all week, folks. Do this until next time. Serve the Lord Jesus Christ. Tell a friend about him. Stay good. God bless everybody.
The Matthew Dark Show, your one-stop show for truth, courage, fellowship, and faith. Available everywhere you get your podcasts.